One of the most heated arguments in the architects community is whether an architect should code, like really code, with an IDE, debugging, logging, etc. Of course, the question is not whether an architect should participate in the development effort and be one of the development team. Of course, he shouldn't do that. The question is whether an architect should have coding skills that will allow him to test new technologies, create POCs, or demonstrate some concepts in code. Those who claim an architect should not be coding say that he has more important things to do than punching the keyboard and producing a few lines of code. He will better be producing patterns, requirements, and documents, they say, and they have a point. But, and I'm sorry to say that, they are wrong. A good architect must have coding skills, and here are the 3 reasons for that. Architecture's trustworthiness. As an architect, you are going to design an architecture which utilizes certain platforms and patterns. You have to make sure the architecture is feasible, and the best way to do it is to try and implement it yourself. Yes, that's not a mistake. You have to be able to implement certain parts of the architecture in order to test them before expecting the poor developers to implement the unimplementable. Yes, that's a word. For example, are you going to recommend using a certain dependency injection package? Test it in a small application and make sure it actually do what you expect it to do. Are you contemplating whether to use a NoSQL database or stick with a traditional RDBMS? No problem. Install both on your machine and test them out. This is the only way to make the architecture trustworthy. By testing it beforehand, you ensure your design can be implemented effectively and easily. Support the developers. One of the hardest tasks of the architect is to make sure the architecture is actually implemented. The best way to do that is to provide an ongoing support to the developers. The architect must be able to help developers when they get stuck while implementing the architecture and examine the developers' work to detect deviations from the intended implementation. If the architect does not possess coding skills, he won't be able to review the code and locate those deviations. Gain respect. One of the key factors to succeed as an architect is to gain the respect of the developers. If the architect is perceived as someone who has no idea what the developers are actually doing, they will think of him as a snob, arrogant, and detached, and will immediately lose respect for him. If, on the other hand, they will see you sitting with them, helping them solve problems and listening to them, they will appreciate you as a down-to-earth, practical, and an all-around nice guy, and will be more than happy to listen to you in the future when discussing architectural topics and tasks. But you can't really help developers if you can't code, aren't you? So, to summarize, keep coding. After all, it won't only help you create a trustworthy architecture, provide an ongoing support, and gain the respect of the developers, it's also fun.